You've probably heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh, but have you ever wondered what it's about? Dating back over 5,000 years, it's the story of a demigod king filled with adventure, monsters, gods, and the one thing he's trying to escape: death. And it all started because a good-looking demigod king couldn't keep it in his pants. Welcome to the mysteries of mythology, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Welcome back, mystics. Just imagine 4,000 years ago, a Sumerian author thought to be called Sinlei Ki U Nini, that's fun to say, pressed a collection of stories into clay. And in 1849, in Nineveh, North Iraq, the pickaxe of Austin Henry Layard struck the ruins of the royal library of King Ashurbanipal. Among its crumbling tablets, they found a story that was the blueprint for all heroes' journeys, and some say the blueprints for all modern religions. It's about a king so powerful that the gods had to intervene. But what did he do that made the gods so angry? We've been telling stories for over 40,000 years. Back then we were painting our stories on the walls of caves, and for a while, stories only existed in memory and voice. Then about 5,500 years ago, the Sumerians changed everything. They developed cuneiform, wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay. For about 500 years, it was only used for administration like food stores and taxes. But eventually someone realized they could use the same marks to hold poetry, prayers and legends. On the tablet holding the legend of Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, there's a story about how writing was created. The story's about how a messenger visiting the Lord of Kulaba was too tired to bring back the king's reply. That's one lazy messenger. You had one job. So the king wrote the reply down for him. The king's speech was substantial and its contents extensive. The messenger, whose mouth was heavy and tired, was not able to repeat it. The Lord of Kulaba patted some clay and wrote the message as if on a tablet. Until then, there had been no putting words on clay. Now, under the sun and on that day, it was indeed so. With the invention of writing, words that once vanished the moment they were spoken could now outlast the speaker. So, if you've ever wondered which story was chosen to be made immortal, one of the most well-known was the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, the heart of civilization in Mesopotamia. He was a demigod, 2/3 of him a god, 1/3 human. If anyone knows how that math works, then let me know in the comments. The opening of the epic starts by describing what a great king he was to create a city and all of its walls to protect the residents. He had no equal in beauty, strength, or intelligence. From the day this Superman Brad Pitt hybrid was born, there had been no one like him. His mother was Ninsun, the wise goddess, and his father was Lugalbanda, a mortal king with divine powers. The foundations of the city had been laid by the legendary 7 sages, the Apkallu. They were demigods that were half man, half fish. On those foundations, Gilgamesh had built the towering walls of Uruk. These walls were important to the Sumerians. They weren't just protection from the elements and invaders. They created a space for civilization and a community to grow. But even though Gilgamesh had built this great city for his subjects, no one in the city liked him. He was their shepherd, yet Gilgamesh would not leave young girls alone. Gilgamesh was entitled, believing everything within the walls belonged to him, and he didn't much care what they thought. He worked his subjects to exhaustion and had a terrible habit of taking the women to his bed, whether or not they wanted to. What pissed the residents off the most was that he had a taste for doing it with the soon-to-be brides on their wedding day. The people prayed to the gods for help, and for a while, none of the gods listened. Finally, Anu, the king of the gods, maybe out of kindness, or maybe just so he could silence the complaints, listened. He called Aruru, the mother goddess, to help. Aruru had created the first humans from clay. Anu instructed Aruru to create a being that would match Gilgamesh's energies. Anu set to work with the clay and created this new being. This was Enkidu. Anu placed Enkidu in the mystical cedar forest. He was fully grown, covered in hair, and was said to be an offspring of silence, because unlike natural births, he had been made, not born. He roamed the open country with gazelles, drank beside wild animals at watering holes, and had never known the life of cities, the worship of gods, or the bonds of human society. He was a demigod Tarzan with horns. A hunter discovered Enkidu, and after 3 days of tracking him, he ran to his father for advice. "Father, there was a young man who came from the mountain. He was strong, he was powerful. All the time he eats vegetation with cattle. All the time he puts his feet in water at the watering place. I am too frightened to approach him. He kept filling the pits I dug. He kept pulling out the traps I laid. He kept helping cattle, wild beasts of the open country, to escape my grasp." His father, an old man, had an interesting idea. "Go to Uruk. Bring a temple prostitute with you. Let her charms lure him from the wild." As instructed, the hunter visited Uruk. There, he met Gilgamesh and repeated what he told his father. Gilgamesh thought his father's idea was a good one and suggested the prostitute Shamhat. The hunter and Shamhat travelled to the cedar forest and waited by a watering hole. When the animals came to drink, Enkidu was with them. The hunter told Shamhat to approach Enkidu and use her wiles to seduce him, which she did. After seducing Enkidu, they made love for 6 days and 7 nights. Afterwards, Enkidu turned to go back to the animals, but the animals were afraid of him. The gazelles saw Enkidu and they started running. The animals of the wild moved away from his person. Enkidu had defiled his body so pure. His legs stood still, though his herd was on the move. Enkidu was diminished. His running was not as before, but he had reason. He was wide of understanding. Enkidu was no longer the beast he once was. Through his sexual awakening, his innocence had been lost. But he also gained human understanding, and with it the awareness of himself. Shamhat offered to take him to Uruk to meet Gilgamesh. She told him how great the city was, ruled by a demigod king that was strong and favoured by the sun god Anu. Believing all this time that he was the most powerful, Enkidu took this as a challenge to his strength and status. So he decided to journey to Uruk to prove he was the strongest. Back in Uruk, Gilgamesh was having nightmares. So disturbed was he by his dreams that he did what any macho demigod would do. He ran to his mummy. "Oh mother, the dream that I saw in the course of this night, the stars of the heavens appeared before me. Like lumps of rock from the sky, they kept falling towards me. I picked one up, but it was too much for me. I kept trying to roll it, but I could not dislodge it. The land of Uruk was standing around it. A crowd was jostling before it. They were kissing its feet like a little baby's. I loved it like a wife, and I caressed and embraced it. I picked it up, set it down at your feet, and you made it my equal." His mother replied, "A mighty companion will come to you, the saviour of his friend. He is the mightiest in the land. His strength is as mighty as a lump of rock from the sky. You will love him like a wife, caressing and embracing him. He, being mighty, will often save you. Favourable and precious was your dream." In the first dream, Gilgamesh was dreaming about a meteorite, and that the residents gathered around in awe. When Gilgamesh brings it back to his mother, it becomes his equal. He had an identical dream, but this time it was an axe. And in Mesopotamian mythology, dreams were never just dreams. Shamhat gave Enkidu some of her own clothes and led him to some nearby shepherds. They offered him bread and beer, but how to eat bread he had never been taught. How to drink ale he did not know. Enkidu was new to being a man. It was his first step crossing over from beast to human. The shepherds taught him how to eat and drink. A barber shaved away his thick coat of hair. They anointed him with scented oil Babylonian style. And with each custom, Enkidu shed a little more of his wildness. When they arrived in Uruk, Enkidu heard the troubling news that a wedding was underway and that Gilgamesh, as usual, was planning to take the bride to bed before the groom. Ironically, Enkidu, who moments ago was running in the fields naked and drinking with the gazelles, knew that this was wrong and decided to do something about it. Enkidu placed himself in the doorway of a house where the wedding ceremony was being held, blocking Gilgamesh's way. Just like the dreams Gilgamesh had earlier about a meteorite, a crowd gathered around them, marveling at the wild man who stood against their ruler. An epic superhero fight scene ensued, one that would make James Gunn proud. They fought so fiercely that the grounds trembled and the doors of the nearby houses shook on their hinges. For the first time, Gilgamesh had met his equal. The fight ended with Enkidu submitting to the king's authority, but their struggle had created a respect between them. Gilgamesh brought Enkidu to his mother, Ninsun. She wasn't exactly nice, calling Enkidu a motherless wild boy, which made Enkidu cry. Either because he cared or because it was getting awkward, Gilgamesh tried to change the subject and raised an idea of an adventure to the cedar forest to defeat its guardian, Humbaba. The forest lay in a distant land where few men dared to visit. There is a reference to the cedar forest being called the land of Ebla, which is thought to be modern-day Lebanon. Enkidu had doubts. He tried to warn Gilgamesh that Humbaba was very strong, and on top of that, he was appointed by the god Enlil to guard the forest. Any attack on Humbaba was also an attack on Enlil. And if you've watched my Enlil video, you know that that's never a good idea. But Gilgamesh only laughed at the caution. "Why, my friend, do you speak like a weakling? With your feeble talk, you vex my heart. As for man, his days are numbered. All that he ever did is but dust." Gilgamesh seems desperate to do something that will bring glory and leave a legacy. He wants his name to live forever, and you'll see how important that is later. Convinced by Gilgamesh's words, Enkidu hesitantly agrees, and they begin preparations for the dangerous journey ahead that would defy the will of the gods. The next two tablets are pretty short. Gilgamesh and Enkidu prepare for the expedition to the mystical cedar forest. Gilgamesh called the elders of Uruk to seek their counsel. They told him to let Enkidu lead the way as he knew the route better and understood the dangers. Enkidu, still uneasy about the adventure, tried once more to warn Gilgamesh of Humbaba's power. But Gilgamesh had made up his mind. The two companions set out, travelling great distances each day, at night taking shelter and taking turns to keep watch. As they drew closer to the forest, Gilgamesh began to have more of his vision dreams. In one, a mountain fell on him, pinning him down until a figure appeared to free him. In another, a fierce creature emerged from the heavens to confront them. After each dream, Enkidu tells Gilgamesh that he shouldn't worry, that the dreams are of their coming victory. But with all their pre-game pep talk, they both knew that the challenge wasn't going to be easy. Gilgamesh and Enkidu reached the cedar forest. It's huge, ancient, and filled with the scent of trees. The forest floor lay in deep shadow beneath the towering trunks that seemed to hold up the sky. And then the ground began to tremble. Humbaba emerged. the guardian of the forest, his face shifting like storm clouds, his roars splitting the air like thunder, and he was in a really bad mood. He sneered at Enkidu and spoke to Gilgamesh. Why cavort with the spawn of a fish who knew not his father? Which is ancient Sumerian for your friend is basic, feral, and has a weird family tree. Gilgamesh was not going to let this insult go. This was his bro Humbaba was disrespecting after all. They unleashed the weapons in their hands, and the forest itself split in two. The Mesopotamians believe it was this battle that created the mountains of Lebanon and anti-Lebanon. The sun god Shamash, wanting to help but not directly wanting to get involved, sent 13 great winds screaming through the trees. They struck Humbaba from every side, blinding him and distracting him enough so that Gilgamesh could strike the final blow. Realizing his defeat, Humbaba's tone changed. He promised to serve Gilgamesh to guard the gates of Uruk if they spared him. When that didn't work, he turned to Enkidu and begged him to change Gilgamesh's mind for old time's sake. But Enkidu, still offended at being called a fatherless fish boy, told Gilgamesh to end Humbaba's life. My friend, do not listen to him. Strike him down before the gods learn what we've done. The specific god Enkidu was worried about was Enlil, who appointed Humbaba to protect the forest. Gilgamesh delivered the killing blow to Humbaba. With his last breath, Humbaba cursed them. May the pair of them not grow old. Apart from his friend Gilgamesh, may Enkidu have no one to bury him. It wouldn't be long before it came true. Victorious, the two cut down the tallest cedar in the forest. In the Babylonian retelling, they turned it into a colossal gate for Enlil's temple in Nippur, a giant "look what we did" trophy. But in the earlier stories, they lashed the trunk into a massive raft and floated it back down the Euphrates. However you tell it, one thing's clear. They had just flipped off the gods, and the gods had noticed. After their victory over Humbaba, Gilgamesh and Enkidu returned to Uruk. The people marvelled at their strength and the cedar gate they'd brought back. Word of their triumph reached the goddess Ishtar, patron of Uruk, and the goddess of love and war. When she saw Gilgamesh, she desired him immediately. Come, Gilgamesh, you be the bridegroom. Grant me your fruits, I insist. You shall be my husband, and I will be your wife. She promised him gifts beyond measure, a chariot of lapis lazuli and gold, drawn by lions, kings and princes bowing at his feet, and the favour of the gods. But Gilgamesh had read Ishtar's Tinder profile and wasn't buying what she was selling. If indeed I were to take you in marriage, will you feed me bread fit for a god? Will you pour me ale fit for a king? Who would take you in marriage, you that does not solidify ice? An Arubu door that doesn't block breeze and drought? A palace that massacres its warriors? A water skin that wets him who carries it? A shoe that bites the foot of its owner? What bridegroom of yours endured forever? What brave warrior of yours went up to heaven? Come, let me count the number of your lovers, and would you love me and change me as you did them? He could have said no, but he went on. He named Ishtar's past relationships one by one, reminding Ishtar of the shepherd she turned into a wolf, who then got hunted down by his own dogs. The stallion she once adored, broken with a bit and a whip until he served men. The mighty lion, caught in pits and traps. Even the poor Ulalu bird, its wings snapped so it could never fly again. Each one of her lovers' fates had ended badly. Humiliated and furious, Ishtar fled to her father Anu, demanding that the bull of heaven be released on earth to punish Gilgamesh. At first, Anu refused, reminding her of the devastation the bull would cause. But Ishtar wasn't finished. She threatened to smash open the gates of the underworld and let the dead pour out to devour the living. Faced with that nightmare, Anu gave in and unleashed the Bull of Heaven. This was the cosmic level bull in a china shop, the constellation of Taurus itself crashing down on Uruk. Its breath dried rivers, each snort ripped open the earth, swallowing hundreds alive. Enkidu almost vanished into one of those pits, but he clawed his way out, grabbed the bull by the horns and held it long enough for Gilgamesh to land a killing strike. Demigods too, gods kneel. Enkidu ripped out its heart and flung it into Ishtar's face. Gilgamesh sawed off the bull's horns to hang in his palace as trophies. And add to the insult, the two had a party to celebrate, and it was probably some of the best beef they had ever had. The night after the Bull of Heaven fell, Enkidu's fate was sealed in a dream. He saw the gods gathered in a council, and Enlil spoke first. They have killed the Bull of Heaven and Humbaba. One of them must die. Even Shamhat appeared, pleading for mercy, but Enlil's word was final. The one who must die would be Enkidu. When Enkidu awoke, he told Gilgamesh, "My friend, in the course of the night I saw a dream. The heavens thundered, the earth responded. I stood between them, and there was a man, his expression grim, his face like an Anzu bird. His hands were a lion's paws, his claws an eagle's talons. He took hold of my hair. I struck him, but he sprang back. He struck me and capsized me like a raft. He trampled over me like a wild bull. I called to you, my friend, but you were afraid. He turned me into a dove, bound my arms like wings, and led me to the house of darkness, the house from which those who enter cannot leave, whose residents are deprived of light, where dust is their substance and clay their food." The dream terrified him, his journey to the afterlife guided by the angel of death. He spoke of being turned into a bird, and strangely enough, that lined up with Babylonian burial customs, where the dead were sometimes dressed in feathers. Not long after, the dream became a reality. Enkidu fell sick. As his body weakened, his fury grew. He cursed the hunter who had first seen him, and cursed Shamhat for pulling him from the wild. "Because of you, Shamhat, I have lost my strength, the purity with which I was created. Because of you, I learned the knowledge of death. The greatest curse of conscious men is the awareness of their own death." He had gained wisdom, friendship, and understanding, and with that, the understanding that all could be lost. For 12 days he lay dying. On the last day, he summoned Gilgamesh and spoke of his sorrow that he wouldn't die in battle like a warrior remembered in glory, but waste away in bed, bringing neither glory nor fame. At dawn, Enkidu was gone. Gilgamesh looked upon his friend's still body, and in his grief he ripped his hair and his clothes, throwing himself across him. "O Enkidu, whom your mother a gazelle and your father a wild donkey created, whom the wild asses reared with their milk, and the animals of the wild taught the pastures, may the paths of the cedar forest mourn you. May the elders of Uruk mourn you. May the holy Euphrates mourn you." To Gilgamesh, Enkidu was more than a friend. He was as vital as the weapons he trusted most. The axe at my side in which my arm trusted, the sword of my belt, the shield before me. A wicked wind has risen up against me and robbed me. For 7 days and nights, Gilgamesh refused to bury him, until he saw the first maggot crawl from Enkidu's nose. Only then did he cover his friend's face like a bride and prepare the burial rites. I shall lay you out on the great bed, a bed of honour. I shall set you on a seat of rest, the seat to my left. The princes of the earth shall kiss your feet. The people of Uruk shall weep for you. I too shall weep for you. And after you are gone, I shall wear the matted hair of mourning. I shall clothe myself in the skin of a lion and roam the wilderness. Gilgamesh was depressed, and it was this grief that would drive him into the wild, on the desperate search that defined the rest of the story. After Enkidu's burial, Gilgamesh couldn't rest. He wandered the wilderness slaying a lion and draping its skin across his shoulders just like Heracles, the hero he's so often compared to. He stopped shaving, stopped cutting his hair. Slowly he began to look like the wild brother he had lost. Grief clung to him, and so did fear. Enkidu's death had shown him how fragile even the strongest man could be. If death could take his equal, then death would one day take him too. One night, shaken by nightmares, Gilgamesh made his choice. He would find Uta-napishtim, the ancient king who survived the Great Flood and was granted eternal life. To reach him, Gilgamesh had to walk the path of the sun, a tunnel of complete darkness that lasted 12 double hours. It was the same road Shamash, the sun god, used each night to cut beneath the earth from sunset to sunrise. Every day Shamash hauled the sun across the sky, and every night he plunged into his tunnel to reset the cycle all over again. Flat earthers celebrate. So Gilgamesh entered the dark. He could see nothing before him and nothing behind, only heat, only wind, and the endless weight of blackness pressing down on him. Until at last, after the 12th double hour, light broke. He stumbled out into a shining garden where every tree glittered with jewels, fruits of carnelian, branches of lapis lazuli, gems in the place of leaves. A paradise at the edge of the world. At the edge of the world, Gilgamesh finally found Siduri, the goddess of wisdom and keeper of the tavern by the sea. I love how there's a pub at the end of the world. But when Siduri saw him approaching, a wild, feral-looking man in animal skins, scarred, unwashed, grief carved into his face, she slammed her door shut. Gilgamesh called out, his voice heavy with loss. "My friend, a mule on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild, who went with me through every danger, the doom of mankind took over him. For 6 days and 7 nights I wept for him. I did not give him up for burial until a maggot fell from his nostril. I grew fearful of death, so I roamed the wild." Siduri listened and gave him what might be the most timeless advice in all of mythology. "Gilgamesh, where are you roaming? You will never find the eternal life that you seek. When the gods created mankind, they also created death, and they held back eternal life for themselves alone. Humans are born, they live, then they die. This is the order that the gods have decreed. But until the end comes, enjoy your life. Spend it in happiness, not despair. Savor your food. Make each of your days a delight. Bathe and anoint yourself. Wear bright clothes that are sparkling and clean. Let music and dancing fill your house. Love the child who holds you by the hand. And give your wife pleasure in your embrace. That is the best way for a man to live." It was wisdom Gilgamesh needed to hear, but he wasn't ready to listen. So Siduri pointed him towards Ushanabi, the boatman who could ferry him across the waters of death. Gilgamesh found him and Ushanabi agreed to help. From a nearby forest, Gilgamesh carved 300 oars, and as they set out, Ushanabi warned him, "Don't let the waters touch your hand." The waters of death were relentless, chewing through each oar until not a single one could be used again. Stroke by stroke, the 300 oars splintered away, until finally the far shore came into view. Uta-napishtim was not what Gilgamesh expected. He looked like an ordinary man. "As I look at you, your form is not different. You are just like me. I was fully intent of doing battle with you, but in your presence my hand stayed. How was it you attended the gods' assembly and found life?" Uta-napishtim explained that the role of a king was to keep harmony between gods and men. The quest for immortality had pulled Gilgamesh away from that purpose. He told Gilgamesh that his search for immortality had only done the opposite. "You kept toiling sleepless, and what did that get you? You are exhausting yourself with ceaseless toil. You're filling your sinews with pain, bringing nearer the end of your life." To drive the point home, Uta-napishtim told him the oldest story of all, the Great Flood. The gods, living among men at the time, had sworn to wipe humanity out. But Ea, also known as Enki, broke the oath and warned Uta-napishtim. So he built a boat, stocked it with his family, craftsmen, and animals. The storm came, tearing the world apart. It was so violent even the gods fled, terrified. And without humans to worship them, some immediately regretted their choice. When the flood passed, Uta-napishtim released a dove. Unable to find food, the dove returned. He released a swallow. That came back too. But when he sent out a raven, it didn't return, so he followed its path and found land. When Enlil realized what had happened, he was furious. Ea argued that his cleverness had earned him his life. And whether out of admiration, reward, or embarrassment, the gods granted Uta-napishtim and his wife immortality. When the story was done, Uta-napishtim turned to Gilgamesh. "But who will convey a divine assembly to make you immortal? In other words, I only lived forever because the gods voted to make it so. No one is calling that vote for you." Immortality wasn't a prize you could win with strength or fame. It was a rare, arbitrary gift, and the gods guarded it jealously. Exhausted, Gilgamesh collapsed. For 7 days he slept. Each morning, Uta-napishtim's wife baked a loaf of bread and set it by him. When Gilgamesh finally woke, the loaves were proof of his lost time. In Mesopotamian thought, sleep and death were linked, so sleeping for so long showed that even Gilgamesh, with all his demigod strength, was still bound by mortal limits. Before Gilgamesh left, Uta-napishtim's wife persuaded her husband to offer one last chance of immortality, a plant that could restore youth. Gilgamesh found it quickly and planned to test it on one of Uruk's elders when he returned. But on the way back he stopped to bathe, and while he was washing, a serpent crept up, stole the plant, and shed its skin as it slithered away. And that, they said, is why snakes shed their skin. Empty-handed, Gilgamesh cried. Then Gilgamesh sat down weeping, the tears streaming down the side of his face. He spoke to Ushanabi, the boatman. "For whom of my kind, Ushanabi, did my arms grow exhausted? For whom of my kind ran dry the blood of my heart? Not for myself did I establish a bounty. For the lion of the earth I have done a favour. Had I only turned away and left the boat on the shore." The weight of mortality hit Gilgamesh all at once. When Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, Ushanabi reminded him of the beginning of the journey. Gilgamesh spoke to him, to Ushanabi. "Go up, Ushanabi, onto the wall of Uruk and walk around. Survey the foundation platform. Inspect the brickwork. See if the brickwork is not kiln-fired brick, and if the 7 sages did not lay its foundations. 1 sa is city, 1 sa is date grove, 1 sa is clay pit, half a sa the temple of Ishtar. Gilgamesh had come full circle. He stood again before the walls he had once built. But now he understood. His true legacy wasn't eternal life. It was what he had built for his people. Though man is mortal, mankind is immortal. And that's the story of Gilgamesh, a demigod king who set out to conquer death and instead discovered something greater. He learned that no matter how strong, beautiful, or powerful you are, death still comes for us. But what we leave behind, our friendships, our stories, the things we build for others, those can outlast us. It's the first epic ever written, and it's still asking us the same question today. What kind of legacy will you leave? Mystics, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Would you search for immortality, or would you accept Siduri's advice to save a life while it lasts? Drop the answer in the comments, I'll be reading through them. If you've come this far, thank you, and please leave a like as it really helps the channel. See you in the next video.